The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Hello and welcome to The Best in the World with Richard Parr. Every week I interview an Olympic champion, a world champion, a former world record holder or a former world number one to find out what they do to become the very best in their sport. This week I speak to the swimmer Rebecca Soni. Fun chat with Rebecca, very similar to the one I had with Stephanie Rice a few weeks ago, where we talk about her success at the Beijing Olympics, also her success at the London 2012 Games. And even though she lost in the 100 metres breaststroke final, she talks about how good it was to be part of making history when she got silver, losing to the 15-year-old Lithuanian Ruta Meilutytė. I think that's how you pronounce her name anyway. It's not one of the easiest names. Anyway, it's a fun chat with Rebecca on the programme. We talk about her being vegan since she's retiring. In fact, we also talk about what she's been up to since she decided to retire after those London Games in 2012. We talk a lot about goal setting. We also talk about her move from New Jersey all the way to California. There's lots of great content and great knowledge on The Best in the World with Richard Parr, and it is a real delight to speak to Rebecca. All right, before we get to that interview, I want to tell you about Audible. Audible is one of the leading suppliers of audiobooks in the world. They've got over 180,000 titles for you to choose from, and you can listen to it on your iPad, your iPhone, your Kindle, your MP3 player. It's something that I personally use, and I really recommend that you should give it a try. In fact, Audible are offering you a free 30-day trial with one free download, so you can listen to any book for free. Go and try it out. Go to audibletrial.com/best. One more time, it's audibletrial.com/best. All right, let's get to the interview with the best in the world. It's the Olympic gold medal swimmer, Rebecca Soni.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Rebecca Soni, three-time Olympic gold medalist in swimming. Thank you so much for being on The Best in the World with Richard Parr. Of course, you've now retired from competitive swimming. Won't you update our listeners exactly what you're up to now, please?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I'm excited to chat about everything. And at the moment, I retired in 2012, so it's been several years since I've been out of training and competing. And since then, what I've done is I've started and I'm working on a project with a good friend of mine, Caroline Burkle, fellow Olympian swimmer, and together we have created Rise Elite Athletes, which is an online mentorship platform helping young athletes connect with the most elite athletes in the world for one-on-one mentorship, all about the mental side of sport, because it's incredibly important, and yet we do not train the mental side. We kind of hope that it just happens for us, and at the same time there's so much that we can do to train for it. So we basically help to supplement athletes' physical training with the addition of mental training as well.
That's amazing. That's a little bit like we learn on The Best in the World every week, but actually you get direct access to the amazing athletes such as yourself. That's incredible. So what are some of the type of things you're teaching these children?
Well, it's a lot. I mean, we certainly do a lot of exercises for, mental exercises, writing, gratitude, mindfulness. We're really just trying to little by little implement some good skills into their everyday training and into their lives. And another important component of what we do, aside from the exercises and the, what we do teach them, is also just the one-on-one connection. Yes, you're connected with one of the best athletes in your sport, but at the same time, the one-on-one connection is something that I think we've overlooked in our fast-paced society these days. And so just having somebody who's there to support the young athlete and everything that they're going through, not just in their sport and in training, but just helping them by just being there for them, having somebody that's just there for them.
And that must be so rewarding for you as well.
Yes, absolutely. I know that both myself and all of my mentors that work with Rise feel the same, that we're often saying, well, I think I'm getting more out of this than my athletes are.
So you mentioned about the different facets that you want these young swimmers and young athletes to kind of learn. So you mentioned kind of routine there and daily activities. Are you someone who sticks to a strict routine?
I certainly enjoy routine. Coming from training as a full-time job, routine is built into our DNA as something that gives us structure and satisfaction. So I'm a little bit of both routine and free flow. I love my morning routines. I really try to adhere to certain things throughout my day, but if I can't, I'm not going to beat myself up about it. So it's one part routine, one part free flow.
So let's get to the nitty gritty. What are some of those things which are always in your routine every single day, Rebecca?
I certainly do try to get my morning routine, which is a little bit of yoga and movement and breath. It's nothing crazy. I just like to, wake up my spine and move around a little bit before I start my day, followed up by a little bit of meditation, walking the dog, which it's probably more for me than than for the dog. It's always good to get outside and kind of finish up the morning routine that way. But throughout the day, the important staples are getting moving, staying active, either going for a run or swim or something to get the blood flowing, eating well, trying to get a green smoothie in if I can, things like that, as well as also kind of a winding down routine in the evening to get ready for sleep.
And how similar is what you're doing now compared to when you were in the real height of training?
I think the routines are different as far as, the morning routine, whereas in the morning it was getting ready for practice. Now it's kind of getting ready for being in my office all day. So there are some, definitely some differences, but bottom line is it's just about, stating this is what I plan to do. The thing that I'm doing is different, but the planning is the same.
Okay, so when you say planning, are you someone who, once you've done your meditation, once you've done your yoga, do you write down what you're going to do for the day, or have you already written it, or have you got goals set? How do you work all of that out?
Yeah, I do try to get a little writing time in the morning right when I start my workday. A little bit of gratitude, a little bit of objectives for the day, what I aim to get done, as well as what I'm trying to get done, let's say for February, since that's the month that we're in. At the beginning of the month, I'll set a couple of goals to to keep myself focused when I'm sitting here getting distracted. So I do like to set those objectives, at the start of my work day, but just outside of work, it's always good to the night before kind of touch base with, here are the things that I'd like to get done, whether it's I'd like to go to the pool for a swim tomorrow, and just getting my head around what I plan to do tomorrow to to make it the best day that it can be to achieve all the different things I'm trying to achieve.
What happens if you don't meet those goals for the day? Do you get frustrated, and do they sometimes snowball? You say, "Oh, I'll do it tomorrow," and then I'll do it tomorrow, and then how do you stop that from happening?
It's usually the smaller things that end up snowballing because I don't prioritize them because there are always more important things. But no, I don't get frustrated. I know that each day is pretty jam packed, at least for my schedule of things I'm trying to balance, both important work things to less important just stuff around the house, or I love cooking. So to me, it's really important to be in the kitchen. And so I have all these different things that, while work might be more important as far as my overall day, I know that, spending time in the kitchen, let's say, is also important to me. So if I need to divert my attention a little bit and, put off completing a goal that I've set for the day, I know that there's tomorrow and within reason, it'll get done. So I tend not to get frustrated and just say, I know that I'm doing the best that I can. And so, there's not much to be frustrated about.
Now, you mentioned food there. What is your typical diet each day?
I'm vegan. I've been vegan for 4 years now, and I really, really love both the lifestyle and the food. I love cooking. I love exploring places. Granted, I live in Los Angeles, so there's plenty of amazing restaurants and farmers markets and so much here. But in general, I try to just get as much healthy living nutrients into into my body, into my life. I fruits and vegetables. I really love cooking, like I said. So in the for usually lunch is my biggest meal, and I'll try to make like a amazing, beautiful, massive salad with a lot of my farmers market goods. I just enjoy being around vibrant food, alive food, fruits and vegetables, and spending time in the kitchen chopping them up and making delicious food is something I really, really love to do.
What's your go-to recipe? What's the one recipe when you're trying to impress someone?
I think a go-to is my chickpea scramble. It's kind of a omelet replacement, if you will, but it's really, really delicious. A lot of people don't know you can make this like pancake-like thing out of chickpeas, and it's really, truly delicious.
Oh, wonderful. So you said you've been doing that for the last 4 years now. According to my mathematics, were 2017, you retired 2012. So you weren't doing that when you were competing. Do you think you could have lived this diet when you were competing as an Olympic swimmer?
I do, and honestly, it's one of my biggest regrets is that I hadn't tried or learned about it yet. I know that it was a general evolution of just the knowledge that I was starting to seek after retirement. So I wasn't looking for it when I was swimming. I wasn't aware of it, and I honestly wish that I had, and I know that I could have done it. I think traveling would have been challenging. The meets and competitions where your food is kind of out of your hands, but as far as just nutritionally and functioning as a high level athlete, I know that it would have not only been possible, but been beneficial to my performance.
So what type of foods were you eating when you were competing?
I was eating a pretty typical healthy diet. I liked eating clean. I liked feeling clean, but it was just kind of normal. Morning was, in some ways not all that different. In the morning was oatmeal before practice, and I'd make salads for lunch. But when I say salad, I mean like really big and with lots of stuff on it. It's not nothing skimpy. But I was eating the chicken and stuff like that for dinner or fish, and I certainly already loved food, so I loved cooking. But yeah, it was kind of a basic, typical so-called clean, healthy diet.
So let's go to the start of your life as a swimmer. When did you first start swimming, and when did you realize that you were good at it?
I started swimming when I was 10 years old, and I don't know if I realized I was good at it around 13 though, but that's when I really fell in love with the sport. In the beginning, I was just thrown in to be, the same place as my big sister, and so I didn't love it all that much at first. But around 13 was when I really started to connect with what we were doing in the practices in the water and start to, I guess, take ownership of it. Um, Around 13 was also when I made it to nationals, which is pretty young to get to nationals. So I guess I didn't really think too much about it, but I knew that I was doing something right, I guess.
You're from Jersey, right?
Correct.
And then you eventually made the journey over to the West Coast. How was that adjustment for you?
It was great. I came out to Los Angeles to go to USC, and I've been here ever since. But the transition was definitely an interesting one. As a kid in New Jersey, you're kind of trained to think that California is this magical land, and it certainly is. Sunshine, and you're outdoors, and But the transition was definitely tough, especially a city like Los Angeles. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of, fashion and just stuff that was not a part of my life in New Jersey. And granted, I don't necessarily participate much in that, but just being around it was a bit of a culture shock for sure, especially as a young 17 or 18-year-old. But yeah, I've loved being out here and just from my everyday life kind of transition, training outdoors. I mean, big difference from breathing chlorine indoors in New Jersey. Every practice, the sunshine and just kind of living that more outdoorsy life on a day to day was a great transition.
It's amazing how sun can change your world.
Absolutely.
And your first Olympic Games was 2008. It turned out to be a pretty successful one for you. Just tell us about that whole Olympic experience in Beijing for you.
Yeah, it was amazing. I never, as a kid, thought I would be an Olympian. I never even thought about it and said it wasn't an option. It just wasn't on my radar. And I don't think I thought of the possibility until 2007. So the year before I made it, I realized, wow, I'm the top in my event in the nation. And if I'm here next year, I'll be on the Olympic team, or I at least have a chance to go for it. So, that kind of described the mentality of all of Beijing, which was that it was just such a pleasure to be there. It was so amazing and exciting, and everything was new to me. And, the dining hall was amazing. The dorms were amazing. Were they really amazing? No, but it was the Olympics, So it was just a really great experience. And of course, there's nerves, there's pressure, but when it came to the competition, I always remembered what a friend of mine had told me who'd been to the Olympics before, and she said, it's just another meet, and it really is on when you're in the nitty gritty of 8 days of competition, which is a really long time, it just turns into another meet where you're doing the same things over and over and over, and of course, when you're standing behind the blocks, what's on the line here, but it was a blast all around, and obviously I performed way better than I had expected to, and just everything about that whole experience was just so much fun.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. Did you consider yourself a medal hopeful? What were your goals going into that games?
My goals were to, in my mind, Liesl Jones, who was the reigning world champion and gold medalist from the previous Olympics, in my mind, and I think the rest of the world's mind, she was going to win. And so my goals really were silver. I wanted to, it was a race for second in my mind. And so, yeah, I certainly had medal hopes, but there wasn't that pressure of you need to win, or there was no need to medal. It was just, all right, let's see what we can do.
Yeah. Do you think that helped you in the end to beat her, because you didn't put your pressure on to beat her? You're almost just trying to perform your best.
Absolutely, and that's how I always approached it. While I knew that she was currently the best in the world, I didn't know her splits. I didn't know how she trained. I didn't like to get too wrapped up in what other people were doing or what their times were. I just focused on myself and what I could do, and I certainly loved the underdog position that I like. From the beginning, I'd always liked to be in that position. So I think that mentality certainly helped to perform the way that I did.
So when you got that gold medal in the 200 meters breaststroke, you broke the world record. Just what was going through your mind when you won that race?
I don't even know. It's such an amazing moment when you touch the wall and you first realize what's happened. The race felt amazing, and I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better race. And then of course you're flooded with emotions from, first of all, you've been nervous and like twitching for the last 24 hours and you're finally done, and then second of all, to have perform that way and have a gold medal. I just remembered, like, I don't even know what to think right now. This is so overwhelming but amazing, and it was really quite an experience, a whirlwind of excitement, and and just so much emotion.
I can imagine. So leading up into that race, as I've found speaking to a lot of the Olympic champions, they keep very much the same routine and their superstitions before any kind of race, be it a final. Was that the same for you? And what was typically in your pre-race routine? And did you have any rituals at all?
Routines were huge. I over the years of swimming and racing, I developed what worked before a race for a routine, and so my routine essentially started about an hour and a half before race time. So it's come in to the pool area and a certain series of stretches, and it could kind of change up, but spending a lot of time stretching, and then from the warm up, everything was a very routine thing. And so I was big on routines, not necessarily superstitions, but in a way, the routine was the superstition. I remember when I was a kid, everybody had these like little trinkets or something that this is my lucky thing, and I thought, oh, how cool! Let me do that. And I tried to have a lucky, I don't know, let's say pair of goggles, and I kept forgetting my lucky things. So I said, this isn't working for me. So I was never really superstitious about things, but definitely loved having that routine as having it be built to set me up in the best way possible. And also, having the flexibility to say, oh, I couldn't do this part of my routine. That's okay. I'll live without it because I think routines are important, but being able to go with the flow is also extremely important.
Yeah, maybe your superstition was forgetting the things you wanted to have as superstitions. And I want to talk a bit more about 2008 as well, because I was looking at the team that you had together for that 4x100 medley relay. That's a pretty impressive team. Natalie Coughlin there, Dara Torres, Christine Magnussen. What did you learn from some of those great swimmers?
It's something amazing about relays is that it's not about you. It's not about individual performance. Swimming is such an individual sport, but the relays are one chance to connect to the team as a whole and to let that energy pull you into a higher level of performance. And so, that was my first relay, which with such an amazing roster of amazing women, and I remember being there with Dara Torres and being like, wow, Natalie Coughlin, wow, it's just such a and then me, like, how am I part of this team? But just definitely learn the power of combined effort and combined energy and what that can do for your performance, because the medley relay is always the last day, and last day of an 8-day competition is like pain train. I think every relay at the Olympics, both times, it's like, well, like I need you girls to carry me through this because my body has shut down long ago. And if somehow you're still able to put forward that performance, it's really quite amazing what your body can do.
So as you were growing up as a swimmer, did you have any role models, both in swimming and out of swimming, who you looked up to?
My biggest role model was always my big sis. She was the one that got me into swimming in the first place, and I always wanted to be like her, like a typical younger sibling. And so, like I mentioned earlier, I never really looked at what a lot of other swimmers were doing. I don't know if I just didn't know enough about swimming when I was young, or what, but definitely looked up to my big sis.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
More from Rebecca in just a moment, but I want to use this time to tell you about Sportuccino. Sportuccino is a sports chat show that I host on Facebook Live, YouTube, and crucially at sportuccino.com. Every single weekday we cover all things related to sport, and we've moved to a new time. We're now at 4 p.m. GMT. That's 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific if you're in the United States. Give us a listen, sportuccino.com, on YouTube and on Facebook. Like the Facebook page as well. It is all about everything to do with sports, health, and fitness. Go and check it out. It's Sportuccino, Sportuccino. All right, let's return to the conversation with Rebecca Soni.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Moving on to 2011, you absolutely dominated those World Aquatics Championships, 100 metres, 200 metres breaststroke, the relay as well. Just everything seemed to click there. Was the success of the Olympics in 2008, did that help you with confidence? What all went right there?
That's a good question. I think, at that point, 2008 was a few years ago, and it, it's always challenging coming back from an Olympics. And yes, it was an amazing experience and a lot of confidence for sure. But then you come back and it's kind of a slump for a while. Nothing's quite as exciting. And so, during those few years in between, I finished college. I became a quote unquote professional athlete. And so I think by 2011, things were, as a professional athlete, you're only living on a 4-year schedule. And so everything's geared towards that Olympics. And so by 2011, I think I really just got everything dialed in as far as my training and where I needed to be, and things just kind of, I guess they kind of clicked and it was just going well, feeling good, and just went with it without overthinking it.
Yeah, you mentioned there about you weren't studying anymore, you'd graduated. How difficult was it back then to cope with the studying and all of your lessons, everything like that, as well as training to become an Olympic champion?
First of all, I didn't approach it as I'm training to become an Olympic champion, because that was probably would have been too much pressure. But honestly, I liked having the challenge and I liked having the distraction. I know a lot of swimmers that say, oh, I'm going to take this year off to focus on swimming. But to me, I could have never done that because that was too much swimming. For me, I needed to leave the pool and have something else to distract my mind, or else I would just think about swimming. And that certainly was a challenge after I graduated from USC and became a full-time athlete, was that I was just swimming. And so I had to, fill my life with other things that created value aside from swimming as well. But when it came to the workload of dealing with college and swimming, I actually really enjoyed the challenge there.
What were those other things you created as value?
It had to be based around training at that point. So I really got into yoga and into trying to create my own workout outside of practice routine. So I was just diving into learning more about the body and what I need and what works well and what doesn't work well. And while that was, you could say, kind of swimming related, it was all separate from what happened at the pool. And so just bringing value into the small everyday things that I needed to do, but separating them from swimming a little bit.
So, of course, you're using yoga now, you're using meditation, using all those type of things. What were some of the things you tried in that period which just didn't work for you?
A lot of swimmers really enjoy weights and getting into the weight room, and I done that through college and I tried it, but I found that I was kind of better off without it. So I did lightweight stuff and I did a lot of functional movement, but not lifting and not heavy weight stuff. So that was certainly something that I was happy to let go of.
So the London Olympics, amazing Olympics in London. It's a role reversal here because back in 2008, you were just looking to get your best performance, maybe to come second because Lysel Jones was the favourite. Going into 2012, you've just won all 3 gold medals at the World Championships. How much pressure was there on you?
It was definitely a lot of pressure. And while you'd think that coming back to your second Olympics and off of a great year the year before, that the confidence would be high and you'd be flying high, but in reality, the pressure was unlike anything I'd ever experienced thus far in my swimming career. And it made it quite a challenge to overcome that. I think that actually the Olympic trials to make the 2012 team was probably the most miserable meet that I've ever experienced because of that pressure. And not only is it your pressure and your coach, but now I had sponsors and I had obligations to these companies that were supporting me, and to perform. And so the pressure was certainly there, and it took a lot to manage dealing with and coping with and learning how to thrive under those conditions.
What were the type of things you tried to do to help?
I remember after trials, I kind of had a little moment and said, okay, if the Olympics is going to be like this, I don't even want to go. That was miserable. Let me see if I can, kind of adjust and refocus and redial so that the Olympics is a much better experience than trials was. And I think it just came down to how you're mentally, talking to yourself, your self-talk, what you're expecting, what you're, how you're approaching things like the sponsor obligations where they're endlessly asking you and filming you and saying, oh, do you hope to win another gold medal? It's like, I'm not going to say no, but at the same time, if I say yes, that's accepting a lot of pressure. And so, learning how to deal with the interviews and the media in a way that didn't let them kind of impact my personal self-talk and perspective. And I think that just takes a lot of self-work and reflection and kind of mental training to say, I have this kind of this mindset, and it's protected from the outside world, because it's really easy to adopt things from other people, and especially when they're asking you things that make you think in a certain way that doesn't necessarily come well with your personal intentions. So just getting really clear on, what am I doing here? Why am I here? What do I know I can do?
And ultimately it proved to be a very successful game for you, 2 golds, 1 silver. But it was the silver which came first. And it's interesting on some of the conversations I've had on the best in the world, how people can view silver in so many different ways, and they can view it at that moment. When they're in one of their early games, they look at a silver as a success. When they're in their kind of later career, they very often look at it as a failure because they were really going for the gold. When you got that first silver at London, having gone in as a 3-time world champion from 2011, what was going through your mind then? Was that a success or was that a failure for you at the time?
That was certainly a failure at the time. And at the same time, the 100 breaststroke was never my specialty. So if that had been the 200, I would have been devastated, absolutely devastated. I'm very attached to the 200 breaststroke, but the 100 was always just like, okay, awesome. It's a second event. It's just another one to get me ready for the 100. And so there was a lot of things that I did well in that race. And in the end, with whatever my body was going through at that moment, I was pretty happy with the swim. It just was unfortunate that it was a silver medal, not a gold. But at the same time, I really love that I was a part of that race and that I was a part of that moment, because it really just felt like such a great moment in the Olympic story and the Olympic spirit. And the the dominant USA athlete gets overthrown by Lithuanian 15-year-old. Like, that is Olympic glory all over it. And so it was cool to be a part of that moment. And in the end, I took away the things that I did well from that race, and was able to reset and come back for the 200, which was, to me, the main event.
And that is one of the things which I think a lot of people remember from those games as well. So you were involved in that piece of history. Yes. So those 200 meters, was that how was that whole experience when you won that 200 meters, retaining that title?
It was an amazing moment. I think equally important to the title was I had a personal goal that I wanted to break 220. I wanted to go under 2 minutes and 20 seconds, which had never been done before by a female. So that, that was a number that was in my head for a long time. I want to say almost 10 years. And especially since, graduating USC, in the last 3 years of my training, it became a real focus. Like, okay, this is what I want. This is the goal. This is the thing that I want to do with my swimming career.
How close did you come to it, Rebecca, before this day?
In Beijing, it was a 220.2. So 2/10 away from it 4 years before. And then I didn't touch it for 4 years. So I went into London saying, okay, I'm 4 years older. I'm 25 now, which is certainly not old, but it's, as far as swimmers go, can you really perform that well? I don't know. I haven't done my best time in 4 years, but I'm choosing to believe that I can. And so, it'd been 4 years since I'd gone that fast, and I essentially trained 4 years for 2/10 of a second. But the interesting story here is that I wanted that so bad that I came up with a plan that I'm gonna do it in semifinals, because semifinals are less pressure. Finals, it's all about the medal and the place, and that was certainly a goal and something I knew I could do. But in semis, like, let me just go for it. I like to feel good in semis, and I think I got it. And so what turned out to, go into that race, and I felt amazing, and warm up felt great, and the race itself felt amazing. And I remember touching the wall and hearing the crowd at semifinals. And I thought, oh my gosh, I did it. But I'd broken a world record, but I went at 220.00, which was incredible for two reasons. One, because I wanted to break 220, so 1/100th faster, and I would have gotten my goal. But I also realized that in the race where I felt absolutely perfect, felt like everything came together. It was my intention, my plan. Everything was about, breaking 220 in this race. But the way that your mind works, you actually, you don't hear words like don't or break. It's kind of like when you say don't eat junk food, but all you hear is junk food, right? And you're craving gummy bears. But it's the same way that I had been for 10 years saying break 220. I should have actually been saying 219, 219, 219. Because my brain was just saying 220, 220, 220. And so in the one race where I felt perfect and I was aiming to get this goal, what actually happened was I got an exact what I asked for of 220.00, which was kind of mind-blowing, gives me chills even now to think about it. So I got pretty close. And while you might think that would set me up for finals, saying, all right, I got this, 1/100th, that's nothing. But it actually kind of did the opposite. Within the 24 hours before finals, I kind of spiraled downwards.
Oh, wow.
Got all up in my head as far as, I always swim better in semis. I'm usually faster, which means, I might not get it. All the while knowing that I could still race and I could win and I would win, like, having the confidence there. But as far as going under 220, I kind of convinced myself that was all that I had. And so it was a tough 24 hours, and I came back to finals that night and felt terrible, where the day before it felt great. And I remember just having this moment before the race and thinking, like, I don't think I can do this, right? And it was actually the moment right before the race started. It was that quiet moment when the pool gets quiet, you're 1 foot up on the blocks and you're about to go. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm feeling not good. This is not good. Let's just get this over with. And, that quiet allowed me to hear that I was telling myself I couldn't do it. So it was, a quick noticing, saying, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing? Why are you talking yourself out of it in this one moment that you've been training for 15 years? Like, who cares what the circumstances are? It's all about what you think, really. And so from that moment, the self-talk changed to, doesn't matter how you feel, you can do it anyway. And it doesn't matter how, I'm going to do it anyway. It doesn't matter if I feel like absolute crap, I'm going to do it anyway. And, it was that self-talk that really saved that whole race, because I I ended up swimming one of the most painful races in my life, but touching the wall at 2:19.5, so half a second faster. When even on that third turn, I was slower than I was the day before. So it was all in that last lap somehow, dropping half a second, which was really quite amazing to think that, in a race that felt absolutely horrible actually turned out to be the best race.
Oh, that's amazing. That moment you're saying when you're on the blocks, when it goes quiet, it sounds like you had 1,000 thoughts in your mind in such a short period there. Is that the moment when most swimmers get very, very nervous?
I think it's way before that. Both in Beijing and in London, I definitely start to feel the nerves, like the intense finals nerves, the moment semifinals is over. So 24 hours essentially of what could be negative self-talk, and you really got to learn how to control that in order to be the best at what you do. I know a lot of elite athletes have experienced this and have naturally created their own way to handle this, but yeah, it definitely starts a lot before, like a good day before the finals.
What's your tip to handle it?
Just listen, hear it. Just like I was up on the blocks, and we have this thought process going through our head constantly, and we don't listen to it. We don't hear it, but what it's saying is having a massive effect on how we are functioning, performing, experiencing the world around us. So my biggest tip is just tune in, listen, hear what it's saying, and you automatically will change it once you hear it. If you hear yourself telling yourself you cannot do it, you're going to get mad at yourself and say, damn it, I can.
And you said about changing the mindset from 220, 220, 220 to 219, 219, 219. How have you used that experience in your life now and everything you're doing as a mentor?
Yeah, I think it comes to setting really intentionally worded goals. And, goals are certainly an important thing. Setting goals, everybody kind of does it differently. Some people set goals outwardly and they want people to know they need that kind of reassurance. Other people, like myself, are inward about it. And, in the end, I think setting goals is really just making sure that it's a fun way of doing it, not a stressful way of doing it. So for me, I kept my goal really personal. I didn't tell a single person, not even my coach. Granted, my coach knew, and he was training me to go like 218 probably, but I never had that conversation with him that said, "Hey, this is my goal." It was that personal, but it was that personalness that made it that much stronger for me.
Oh, that's interesting. And of course, as you mentioned at the start of the show, you retired in 2012. Just to explain to our listeners how that all came about, because you were 25 at the time, I believe.
Yeah, so I knew going into London that this was my last go. There were a couple of reasons that I decided to hang up the suit, and in a way, I love that I was able to go out on top. Let's say, it's something that I think I felt good about, and it felt like a good time for me to move on. But I think the biggest thing was that, my body was saying, I've had enough of this. I need a little bit of a break. But secondly, the whole experience of going to a second Olympics and the pressure to perform, I had the sense of, if you do it again, the world record, the gold medal, then you're just performing up to expectation. You're not doing anything new. You're not pushing the boundaries. And of course, there are ways that you can push the boundaries and make it new and exciting. But to me, it was you either do the same or you suck or you failed, right? And while that's not necessarily the case, I think that, the challenge of swimming was, it was kind of like checked off, like, okay, done. What can I do? Do it again. Well, I don't want to do it again. I want to do something new. And, it's not like, let's say, rock climbing where there's might be a bigger rock to climb. The Olympics is the Olympics. And I felt like I'd done all that I can. I felt like I gave all that I had, and I was ready for a new challenge. So I knew going into London it was the end, good outcome or bad outcome. And so to walk away from swimming was certainly still tough, even that I knew, but it still was a very, very tough transition, which I know a lot of athletes can relate to. But it was something that was planned, and it was going to happen regardless.
Well, I would ask you what your goals are now, but as you just told me, you keep them to yourself, so I won't ask. But you're doing your work with Rise, and of course you've also done some work before with the United Nations Foundation Girl Up campaign. Just how important is it for you to be giving back?
It is very, very important, and I know that I can give more, and I've been so wrapped up in building my business right now that I do still crave that. So I'm glad that I have had that work with Girl Up. And Girl Up is a great foundation, and it got me, it gave me a chance to connect with something bigger than myself and to experience some things. I got to travel with them to Guatemala and see these communities that, you can see them on TV or online, but it's a totally different experience to be there with them and to feel them. And so it's definitely an amazing experience. I know, as we're talking about it, I'm thinking, oh, maybe I should make my goal to bring more of that back into my life and to kind of balance the work that I'm doing with Rise. But yeah, it is incredibly important. And, it's kind of a win-win because you're benefiting the world around you and your community, but also massive benefit to you as the individual doing it.
Well, it's certainly been win-win talking to you today, Rebecca. Really appreciate all of the knowledge you've passed on and the stories of your amazing career. Just before we go, can you tell us how we can continue to learn your great knowledge on social media and also how we can find out more about Rise, please?
Yeah, absolutely. On social media, I'm at Reb Soni, R-E-B Soni. That's on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all those. And Rise, you can find us at riseeliteathletes.com, or social media is at the Rise Life. So you can definitely check all that out there.
And we'll put links to all of that on the podcast description page as well. Rebecca Soni, thank you so much for being on the show today, and thank you for being the best in the world.
Thank you.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.
Now, as I mentioned, Rebecca Soni isn't the only swimmer I've spoken to on The Best in the World with Richard Parr. We've got a pretty impressive list of guests when it comes to the world of swimming. I've spoken to Natalie Coughlin, Stephanie Rice, Nathan Adrian, Tom Shields, Robbie Rennick, Nick Gillingham. Go back and listen to them all on iTunes. Best in the World with Richard Parr. Subscribe to it and give us a rating and review. That would help a lot. We're also on Acast, acast.com/best. Go and check both of those out. And of course, like our Facebook page, facebook.com/best. In the world. Best in the world, not just best. And also, we've got lots of other interviews with people from all different sports, from cricket to rowing to sailing to rugby. You name it, we've got it on The Best in the World. So if you want to get better in your sport or just in your everyday life, go back and listen to the back catalogue. All right, I hope you have a wonderful week. We will be back next Wednesday with another episode of The Best in the World with Richard Parr. Goodbye.
The Best in the World podcast with Richard Parr.